All right, well, I'm going to get started working on online services for this game. So I've got this massive design that I've got going on, and I just need to get started working on it. It's going to take a while, but got to start chipping away at this gigantic iceberg. So previously I put together all the basic calls for this, and I generated a whole bunch of stubs for them, so I got to fill them all out. I got to actually write the server side of this. So let me just get organized here. So I got these services. We made the stat service and the QoS service and the social service. And what I need to write is the stats service. And that is what this is. Alright, so what is this? So fetch stats, alright, so we have to be a user. We're passing in a list of users that we want, and stat context and stat names. Alright, so for this, we are going to want to fetch the stats for a user. We're going to want the stat context and the stat names. So I need to pull up the database as well. Figure some of this out. Twitch is being a pain in the butt, as usual. Alright, so let's just start off with some basics. Alright. So I'm writing, our backend servers are all in Java, and I've got a custom framework that I wrote. Alright, so fetching user stats. So there's a few things that we want to do. So grab the list of users. We're going to want to create our SQL call, and grab stats and return as array of stat objects. Alright, so for stats, how do we want to gate? We probably want some basics here for like how many users you can actually fetch at a time as like a sanity check. So let's just say like you can fetch 50 users at a time. That's not a bad plan. Because I'm trying to think about like what's the authentication here. So like if we're fetching a user's stats, do we want to lock this down to anything more specific than a user? So for instance, right now, like we've got this stats information, which has got your account ID, the context, the name, and the value. So this is going to be like account 5, stat context, offline, stat name, victories, and then the stat value is 5. So you've had 5 wins total on your account. And we have all-time, seasonal, monthly, all that. So then we have stats history. Is my internet just not working super well or something? Whatever. So I'm trying to think, okay, I need to get back into my brain back into the stats system. So what exactly have we got for stats? So we have stats storage, and then we've got like stats history. So we've got stats service. So we have stats, and then we've got get intervals. So intervals will give us our stat history. Our stat interval. I'm gonna have to go pull that up. What does it look like? I've got this big autogen system for what objects look like. All right, so stat objects. Interval ID, interval context, start time, end time. Alright, so this is get intervals, which just gets intervals. It doesn't get, it just gets what things. Then we got like leaderboard. So do we need another call here for stat history? Like, let me think. We have a stat history database. Yeah, so I think we need to get we need another call here, which is fetch stats, fetch historical stats. Oh man, alright, let me think. Because we got these basic stats, and then we have like these historical stats for different buckets, and we'll have them all roll over into each other. So when we call fetch, we actually want to fetch our history too, don't we? So we're gonna want all of these sorted stats for these users. Because these are kind of all-time stats, and then we need, like, basically if you go to a stat screen, we're going to want to know what's the number of victories today, which will be like 5, and then we also need to know all-time victories, weekly victories, all these stats for yourself. Great. Regular wipes of the stats and history table. Yeah. So we need to fetch stats, and then we need like fetch complete stats. And we're probably also going to want a fetch stats history. Okay, so fetch complete stats is simple. That's like just users, stat context, stat names. Fetch stat history is going to need to take, I guess, interval contexts. And all right, so these guys need to return not just user stat arrays. We need user stat history arrays, but it's going to need to be more complete than that. So it's going to need to be something else. It's going to be like complete user stats. And we'll have like an account ID. we'll have an array of user stats. So we'll have like user stat array, and then we'll need user interval stats. So it'll have an account ID on there for the stat. It's going to have then an interval ID and then like a user stat on it. Is that how we want to do this? I guess we just need, so user interval stats is going to need I guess it's just an array of user stat history. And we could have like our interval like interval context and then interval ID. Well, what would we have here? It would actually be this stat interval. And then it would be the actual stats. Okay, so that would be user interval stats. So this would be that guy. And this would be stats. And we probably want an account ID on here. Just to make it simple. Okay, and then we'd want our complete user stats, which is going to be account ID, and then it's going to be a user stat array, and it's also going to be user interval stat array. All right, so what this is going to do is it's going to make it so we can fetch the complete stats, fetch our stat history. For users, we'll have different interval contexts, stat names. All right, so user stats, stat history. So that's our complete user stats array. I think we got it. All right. Let's regenerate our service code. Variable was null, complete user stats. Duplicate ID 1 in service stats. Yeah, I forgot to make these IDs work. Duplicate ID 7. That is correct. So basically I define all the service calls in JSON. I then generate C++, JavaScript, Java, and all the rest of our tool chains bindings for every service so I can call it without having to write 2 million lines of code in order to use our services. Hooray for metaprogramming. So let's compile this up. And the other thing that's nice about having a generated system like that is you get compile errors. So I added a few new service calls. I actually get errors if I don't implement them, and it'll fail to build. So I have to go do the thing. Alright, so max user stat fetch, let's just do max basic user stat fetch. Throw some basic limits on there. Okay, so let's do some call validation. So it's not call, it's Alright, so what do we want here? So if our user So if our users are null, then basically the users So let's return a bad. Alright, so we got all our users. So this is just fetching basic stats. So basic stats have a stat context, a stat name, and then we have our stat values. So we need to create a new prepared statement here, which covers this case. What do you think? I'm also going to need to get the stat database. So I think it's like WD app server global. Is it dash server globals get stats We don't have a get stat DB. All right, let's just do get game databases. All right, so we want get stats DB. Do we not have these wrappers working? Like, we have a stats database wrapper. And do we call register? Yeah, so we have sstatsdb. Yeah, I'm just confused. So we will see. So, alright, we'll grab our database. We need to then craft our call here. So, what are our cases? So, if our call is going to have stat context and stat name, so basically there are three cases. Basically, we have either we have a custom call or we don't. Let me take a look at this real quick. So we need like a custom call. It's been a while since I've worked on this. I just don't want to show everything. So what's the customized DB query do? Database, call name, statement, create statement, fill out parameters. So I think we're making a simple array query. Alright, so I guess should we do a database call for every user, or should we just make one big ass database call that fetches everything? Well, probably one that fetches everything. Alright, so how are we going to do that? We're going to need, it's going to look like select star from our stats dot user stats where, and it's going to be our account ID equals this and dot dot dot. I mean, this is going to be or here actually, and stat context equal and then stat names equals question mark. So that's going to be our statement. So we probably should just do a simple DB array query, which is going to be stats. So this will be stats underscore let's see, our customized database query has this like create statement overridden. So we actually need to use this guy. I haven't had to use all this stuff yet, so we will see. So what is this all pissed about? The constructor is undefined. We don't need to define any of that. Alright, so it's going to need to take a database, a call name, and a statement. So we'll get the database name. It's going to be called fetch stats, and then we're going to have our statement. And why is this all pissed off? I know. Alright, so there we go. All right, so let's craft our statement. So if all right, so our statement is going to be select star from, and we're going to want our statsdb.get. We really should get our the actual database, like get con on it. Let's implement that. Alright, so that's going to call all the create statement stuff. Excellent. Alright, so we need the user stats table name. So that table name is going to be somewhere in our generation, right? So we're looking for the user stats table. How do we do this? Well, that's, well, all right. I mean, we actually, like, that'll return exactly what we're looking for with, like, user stats history all nicely escaped and everything. So it's like I actually wrote a system that I could use. All right, so attach users, attach stats, context, and attach stat names. So we're going to do for all right, so we're going to need the name of the variable. So it's going to be stats user stat var names. Yeah, rnames dot count ID. Yeah, okay, so it needs the slashes. Alright, so if I does not equal that, do that. So b dot append our opening brace. Closing brace. Okay, so now I need the context. So if request well, let's just put some sanity limits on this crap. Hello, Ender3. How are you doing today? I'm just working on server calls. So basically fetching stats from our backend database and writing the server side for all that trash. And stats are just a giant mess. So we've got this huge design here of this massive stats tracking server system with history for everything, and just gotta start working on it. So I'm making the SQL query for all that. And since we're also being super professional, we're using prepared statements and everything's nicely escaped and everything else. Love-hate relationship. Yeah, the thing is, like, I'm using MySQL for this project, and MySQL, in my opinion, is kind of what you want to use for your database architecture if you can use it. But I have auto generation for like every basic call. So like if I wanted to like grab stats, I can do statsdb to like get user stats by account ID. Like I can just do that. The problem is for this call, this fetch stats call has a list of users, context, and names, and so that these are all customized. So like you can be like, okay, I just want to see all my victories. I don't want to see like everything. I just want to see you know, how many times I've won in just like a single stat line, as opposed to, you know, it's like just pull every fucking stat I've ever gotten. So, got to keep it simple. Gotta remember those question marks. Alright, so this is the stat context. So we'll append that. Alright, and then we need the stat names. So it's basically this thing, but we want to do stat names. Love-hate relationship. Yeah, I've used MongoDB, I've used MySQL, I've used Microsoft SQL, I've used Dynamo, SimpleDB, Cassandra, all sorts of stuff in production. You know, like Electronic Arts and everything, and I just always come back to MySQL at some point with these things, because it's just like, well, it works. The 80's called, they got your solution. You don't need just don't worry about it. It's also cheap, so that's cool. Okay, so that'll create our whole query. So we should be good to go there. We've got ORs for everything. So this will parse our results, but first we got to fill out our parameters. So we've got to go through for all of our users. So for 0 is less than. I guess we should have an int var counter equals 1. Let's go for string count in users. Is that right? We can't, yeah, auto final isn't going to work here for this, so I guess we could just do add all. Like, that's not the worst thing. This is Java, and it's doing a database call, so I always make fun of people who, like, super micro optimize their, like, server calls sometimes. They're like, oh, yeah, well, you're, like, copying an array right there. I'd be like, dude, you're calling the fucking database. Like, you're calling the database. Like, it just, what are you doing optimizing that? You're not going to get any better. All right, so we have our statement. So we're just going to call set string var counter ++ and just set our account. I'm just happy when it works. Well, there's that too. Okay, so we just need to do if request.stat context does not equal null. And for string context in request.stat context, call the statement, set string, ctx. If request.stat names does not equal null, don't do the same thing with our stat names. Alright, so that should set all of our parameters. So our results set, and we need to make our results. So I think user stats, have I got a array from result set? Yeah, I've got this array from result set. So I just do this stats user stat. So I can just pass in this result set, and I basically just say result equals this. Oh, I need to result.setObject. There, done. Awesome. Yeah, it's also like, you know, it's Java and how many service calls you're doing. If you're calling the database and fetching a whole bunch of data, none of this stuff's going to matter. It's going to be our marshalling and network layer. Okay, so we've got our results and we want to turn it into an array of user stats. So we need our result. Why is this a void? This is fetch stats. This should have a response. Yeah, response is spelled response, obviously. So I need to go fix all this trash. Means I probably also screwed up the social service. No, that looks okay. QoS is okay too. Alright. Let's regen that. Yeah, and basically, if you're not familiar with the project, I'm working on this game Dashkin, which is out right now in early access. And like you can play right now. It's $10 on our site, or free whenever we launch an update. We hand out codes to everybody, which was yesterday. This is the game of production. We're building the stat system, and right now it's a... Oh no, my monitor went blank. Why? But it's an arcade soccer game, online multiplayer, and you go score goals as this little dude Bitey. And it's like 3v3 right now, and it's a lot of fun. At least I think it is. But whatever, it's early access. So I'm building the whole stat system for that. That's all Unreal 4, C++ client, C++ game server, and then we have this Java backend for all the persistence and login and auth and all that fun stuff. All right, so this guy, I need to refresh all of this, and it's going to get super angry with me. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not the artist. I have the artist guy is Adam Phillips. He made the Bitey of Brackenwood series, which you might know from Newgrounds back in like 2006. But he's doing all the art and story, and I'm kind of his arms and legs to get it done. Is that going to make a stats array? No. Alright, so that'll be our response right there. Let's go fix all the rest of this. Fetch complete stats is wrong. Did I not fix that? I did not fix that. Yeah, well, we've got 4 updates out so far for the game, so I'd hope it would be looking like it's getting somewhere. We're hopefully going to be out on Steam in the next, I would say, 5 months. We'll get enough content where we're comfortable, like, all right, we're ready to go. All right, so we have got our, that call is finished, but I need to regenerate, so let's do that. And it's just a 2-man team. It's just me and him. So, you know, it's not, we don't have a publisher. It's all self-funded. So it's just us making the game. So that's how it is. Okay, so call to fetch stats is written. So what we need to do now is do the same thing, but for our completed stats and our stats history. Let's do stats history first. So let's grab our users. So this isn't complete, this is just history. So we got our users. What does this request got? This request has stat history, so we have interval context, stat names. So let's do our sanity checking on our max context. This will be just putting some basic sanity checks on these calls so we don't just blow up our database. And I'm not really too worried about people, you know, trying to like sabotage the system by putting in a bunch of garbage data and take the servers down. While that's always a concern with server development, I'm probably more concerned with me writing a bug that completely blows the shit out of our database. Because that's what happens all the time. Like in like the 8 years of server development, the worst problems that we've ever had with like people taking the service down is when somebody on our own team writes something that makes all of our clients denial of service attack our backend. Like, oh, the login failed? You better hit the login page again, just in a tight loop, so you have like 4,000 people all just like slamming your login page, and it takes your entire system down. You know, fun times. All right, interval context and stat context, so we're going to need to do very much the same thing with the stat history. So we're going to need to create our thing, our SQL statement, and do that. That sounds terrible. That does not sound fun at all. It's true. All right, so this is going to be our user stats history. All right, so we got stat context, stat names, and what is it? Interval ID, interval context. Are these interval IDs or interval context? All right. Because this is interval ID that we've got. So I think it needs to be like this, which means we actually need to take the contexts, grab the latest context, and fetch that. So how is this going to work? If we're calling fetch stat history, we want to fetch stats for a specific context, we could fetch everything, but so the contexts are the interval context is like seasonal, monthly, weekly, or daily. So we have our stats history. If we just fetch on interval context, we're going to get everything for every week, all the time. Probably don't want that. So for fetch stat history, do we want contexts? So how are we going to use this? Because like, we're going to call fetch complete stats, and that's going to give us our user stats and like all the current contexts that are the latest context. Otherwise, we're going to fetch intervals for a specific context, and then we call with context IDs. So what we probably should do is, instead of interval contexts here, we should have interval ID. So I'll have to change this. I'm kind of making up this service as I go along. So yeah, that's a thing. Okay, so if request